Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Friday Night Monk Chat here at Empty Cloud Monastery. I'm here with Bhante Sanata Vihari. And we may have also Ajahn Wade.
He's on the way.
Yeah, on the way.
Wade is on the way.
In a little bit. So maybe we can just start out saying hello to
Yes,
people.
and Ayavata.
Yes.
Can't forget.
So hello to Hema and S, Prairie, Rick, Mary, Gita, Maria, Mariah, Jerry, Mano, Karuna, Bhumika, and John. And yes, here's Ajahn. So move over. Make room. Okay. And so, sorry.
I was going to say, they can take advantage of this time and type in their questions.
Yeah. So, Ajahn, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Getting into position here. We've just finished, maybe the Venerables mentioned it, we just finished an important Sangha Kama, which is community, monks' community business, basically, and for seminaries as well, of related to the code of discipline for the monastics, and according to the rules laid down by the Buddha himself 2,500 years ago, that the bhikkhus have protocols they have to follow about every 2 weeks, and it's time to the lunar phases, and today is a full moon, and so we were taking care of that, and it ran just up until the last minute before starting monk chat. So it's coming down now. My name is Ajahn Wade Buripano, and I'm a visiting monk, ordained in the lineage of Ajahn Chah in Thailand, in a monastery called Wat Machan in Rayong province, back in 2014. And I'm visiting back again from last year. I was here for about 3 months last spring, and had a wonderful experience then, and having a very pleasant experience again this year. I've been here for most of the last month or so, arriving in mid-May, and I came back just about a week ago from a trip down to Lion of Wisdom Meditation Center in Maryland, as I'm traveling a little bit before the Wasa starts in about another month from now. So this is Monk Chat, and the opportunity for you all to type in questions on anything related to Buddhism. And I wonder if the other Venerables have had a chance. Have you had a chance to introduce yourselves as well?
Briefly, yeah, very briefly.
Okay. Yeah. One of the things we thought we might talk about a little bit today is today's a very special day, not only because it's a full moon. We had the monks' business that I was referring to, but it's a very important day in the history of Theravada Buddhism, and because today is the recognized anniversary in Sinhalese traditions of Theravada Buddhism that the Arhat Mahinda went to Sri Lanka. And so earlier today I asked Bhante Sanata Vihari, having been ordained in a Sinhalese monastery here in the United States, or ordained in a Sinhalese tradition, I should say, residing in Sinhalese monasteries in the United States, if he would tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, Bhante, thank you. So as Bhante already kind of briefly explained, today is the day that we remember this kind of incredible act, this incredible journey that Arhat Mahinda took all the way from, central northern India of the Mauryan Empire. He was the son of Emperor Ashoka, and he actually ordained as a teenager, and it's said that the day that he ordained, he became an arhat. So he was a prodigy in the making. And not too long after, his father sent him with 4 other bhikkhus, a samanera, and 1 layman to Sri Lanka to share the Dhamma. And they had planned on doing this earlier, but I guess that there was a former king there. The former king was very old, and Emperor Ashoka thought this king is stuck in his ways. He won't be too open to listen. So they waited for him to die. And then once he died, they knew the new king, his son, took the throne, and they sent Arahant Mahinda and the other bhikkhus and samanera and laymen to Sri Lanka. And when they first got there, actually, they didn't like interact. They were like chilling in the forest and in the mountains. And it said that at that time they were trying to take in the culture and learn the language. So I think it was a few months. And then after some time, they were discovered, right? And then the king went to go visit him. And there was a series of like, kind of like the debate between the Greek king and what's the name of that? Malinapanya. It's kind of like a little Malinapanya, but a little more poetical. Like it's kind of like koans that kind of little koans that are going back and forth. And then eventually he convinces the king to follow, and supposedly all the court, like the whole royal family, becomes monks. Becomes Buddhist. And it's said that the king at least becomes a Sotapanna upon listening. So he becomes an Arya too. So then after that, the king becomes a patron of the Sangha, and he starts, building monasteries, and he starts supporting the Sangha and doing like Sanghadana, coming to the monasteries and feeding the monks. And actually, this has a big impact on how Buddhism is practiced in Sri Lanka to this day. So in India, there was always the bhiksha, going on alms round, going on pindapat, and you see that in other Theravada countries. But in Sri Lanka, since Buddhism arrived there, they were sponsored by the king right away, and then the king was always bringing food to the temple. So they had the tradition of keeping the meal invitations. There was no necessity to go on pindapat. So that's why, even to this day, you don't really see as much pindapat as you see in Thailand, where thousands of monks hit the streets, right, and the roads and the jungles every day. And you might see it in Sri Lanka too, but it's kind of more, how can I say, like ceremonial or orchestrated, right? They kind of plan, like, okay, this day we're going to do it, and people go out there, and it's not as just kind of like a daily habit that happens. I'm sure there's some forest monasteries that do have more of that practice, but in general, this kind of tradition is still kept to this day. But not only that, after some time, Venerable Arahant Mahinda also sent for his sister Sangamita, and he told her to bring Bodhi Tree, from Bodh Gaya to Sri Lanka. And I think part of the story goes that one of the queens, she had some adversity towards Buddhism and Buddhist monks and all of this, and she, wanted to destroy the original Bodhi tree, burn it down. So then one way of preserving this was to, give a piece to Venerable Arahanti Sangamita and bring it to Sri Lanka. And to this day, if you go to Anuruddhapura, the Bodhi tree is still there. So that, from that same lineage, that Bodhi tree still continues to this day, all the way back to the Buddha, from the same generations, right? So in India, this tree is a common tree, so anyone can just grab one and plant a Bodhi tree. But the one in Sri Lanka is the one that Venerable Arahanti Sangamita brought, and straight directly from India, and directly from the one that the Buddha sat under. So that's another powerful thing that happened at that time. And it's great because when Buddhism came to Sri Lanka, you have both the Sangha of bhikkhus and bhikkhunis there right from the beginning, they're both there. And I think that kind of also kind of lends itself to why, the bhikkhuni ordination is a little bit more palatable in Sri Lanka, right? And they have this great reverence for Sangamita. Like, you go to temples, there's murals of her, there's all these beautiful stories about her. We have paintings of her in my temple too. So this is great devotion towards the bhikkhunis and recognizing all the great effort that they've done. So that's another kind of interesting thing. But what I've experienced the most on this Pasan Poya Day is that at our temple, we usually have we dedicate this full moon to the kids. So we do like a kids 8 precept retreat. And other temples do this too. So the Pasan, we think about like kids. It's time for the opportunity for the kids to practice the Dhamma, So it's pretty awesome. The kids, they're really good. Like, actually, they don't complain. But I always ask the adults, I said, please bring some American food for the kids. I love rice, but those kids have to eat it more than I do when they grow up on it. So sometimes they want to taste something different. So I say, come on, let's get some cakes for them. Let's get some ice cream. Let's get pizza. Let's get chips. Let's get soda. Let's do something to make it fun for them. Kind of like when you go to school and they have like a pizza party at school, because we want to kind of make them feel comfortable. We don't want to make them feel obligated. Because when I was a young boy, going to church was so boring. I hated it, and I don't want the kids to feel that way about Buddhism. I don't want that to happen. So I try to make it as, I still have to kind of keep within the Sri Lankan culture. There's some barriers that I cannot break, and I shouldn't, but I try to, make it as palatable for the kids. But I actually look forward to this day because I love the kids. The kids are just, Sri Lankan kids are so amazing. They're so calm. I've never had any problems with any Sri Lankan kids. I've never had any problems. They're so well behaved. They know the chanting. They know all these things, and they're so intelligent, and they really take care of each other. They have this kind of like inner clique kind of thing. It's amazing. And they just help out. Like, they know to help out. I don't have to say anything. They just start helping out. Like, almost like if they were monks, you just kind of intuitively know that you need to help out the other monks. So they're really amazing. I think it's because it's such a small community, especially in the United States, that they stick together and they take care of each other. So for me, my kind of, when I think of this day, yes, I know that it's about Arahant Mahinda and Arahanti Sangamita. But for me, I'm always like, oh, Buddhist kids. It's like Buddhist Kids Day. And that's such a beautiful thing. And then I'm also reminded that, what's happening right now, we're kind of in that time around the same kind of, in the West, we're in that kind of same situation that Arahant Mahinda was, right? Of the Dhamma coming to a new place, right? And settling to that new place and finding sponsors and people following Buddhism. And just in the last couple, 20, 30 years, there's actually complete American Sanghas, right? Like Western Sanghas, where everyone there, like at Abhayagiri and at Wat Metta, where people are fulfilling the requirements that Arahant Mahinda had for the king. He says, not until you establish local Sangha can we say that there is Buddhism in Sri Lanka, right? So although there might be Buddhism in a lot of places, especially like meditation centers or Buddhist books, or there's Buddhist retreats going on, according to Arahant Mahinda, there really isn't Buddhism until there's a Sangha of bhikkhus, right? At least at a minimum. So this is kind of like the standard that we have to set. And I'm so happy that, at least in the United States, we can say, yes, we do. And there's ordinations, or higher ordination is happening in the United States. And, when I think about this, I just have so much appreciation and so much gratitude towards all the Buddhist communities, right? All the Asian Buddhist communities who made this available to us. The ones in Asia, in Sri Lanka, and Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, India, Bangladesh, Thailand, Vietnam, all these beautiful countries carrying on this beautiful tradition for over 2,500 years. And it arrived in Sri Lanka about 2,300 years, 2,200 years, around that time. So they've preserved it. So like great people like Ajahn Wade and Ayavada and myself, so we can do this, so we can practice this. If it wasn't for them not dropping the ball, right? Like in one of the suttas, the king tells his son, make sure the wheel doesn't move. We have to uphold the wheel. Don't be the last one. Don't be the last one. Don't drop the ball. Don't let the wheel leave. So now we're part of this tradition of Arahant Mahinda, of making sure to preserve the Dhamma and preserve the practice. So yes, I just wanted to share with you. I mean, you can Google this. So you can Google Arahant Mahinda and find out all the details. But yes, it is a remarkable story. Today is a very important day, especially because it's very remembered in Sri Lanka. It's like a national holiday. I mean, all full moons are national holidays, but this one is especially important because they also do a lot of dana for lay people. So a lot of people get together and they offer dana to anyone. So it's like, anyone can come and eat and get food. So yeah, that's just what came to mind. I mean, I could talk for hours about this because we can get into all the details about how Theravada Buddhism developed in Sri Lanka. But I feel like this is kind of like the essence of what's happening today.
That's wonderful. It certainly sounds like from the earlier conversation we had, you're telling me some things about it, and thinking about the grand history. It certainly sounds like a topic worthy of exploring, maybe in its own session sometime if people have an interest. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure you've whetted the appetites of a lot of people. Thank you very much for that explanation.
Okay, should we turn to the questions? I think we're probably building up here. Yep, quite a lot. Okay. So the first question we have is from Hema, who says, it's a little bit funny. To lay people, it seems like Tudong practice is similar to hiking, camping, and picnic. Sounds like a lot of fun. Can lay people join monastics for that and support their meals during the trip?
Yes, actually they can, depending on the monk's willingness, the monk or the monk's willingness. and what they're trying to do on Tudong. When we use the word fun, usually the monks wouldn't be going out to do this sort of thing for fun. But they may appreciate the opportunity to have some seclusion. This is usually an important aspect of it. They may have, for example, a reason to travel a long distance. For example, to see a teacher, to visit a holy site, or something like this. And so the walking aspect of the practice may be pragmatic. It's a way to get where they're going, and so they may kind of additionally by necessity need to camp out and this kind of thing. But they wouldn't typically be doing it for fun. If they're walking to a place simply to seek seclusion for meditating, or to seek various places to meditate in, they'd be desiring the seclusion of getting away from it all, and also to be in a simpler environment. If you're out in nature, living under a tree, as one monk said, when you're living out in the forest under a tree, then the mind doesn't create the idea of owning anything. There's nothing around you is kind of man-made, and doesn't seem like it would, the mind doesn't actually think of it as being ours. It's simply elements of nature. And so being out in the wilderness on your own can be very conducive to letting go of a lot. Physically, you have to let go of a lot to pare down your belongings and leave your shelter. Say, for example, a monk is living in a monastery, leave the shelter and leave the enfoldment of the Sangha, the community of monks, and the lay people he's normally kind of dependent on, and he has relationships with, and let go of so many things to go out on their own or in a small group to seek seclusion for practice, or to go on, as I mentioned to the start, kind of a journey to reach a certain destination. And so these are the attitudes and the perspectives that they bring to it when they go out on Tudong. The word Tudong actually is a Thai word derived from the Pali Dutanga, simply a slightly different way of pronouncing it, really, is in the Thai language now. And Dutanga is an ancient Pali word meaning an ascetic practice. And so the expectation when they're doing this is that they would be following a set of ascetic practices that many people would find quite difficult to follow. So they would eat, for example, one meal a day. They would live, as I said, in the wilderness, which is in and of itself is an ascetic practice, but also perhaps like just under a tree. Or they may have a simple shelter like a tent, for example. They might live in a cave, or some might even go so far as to live in the open without any shelter. These are just ideas of some of the ascetic practices that they would follow. And so these, most people wouldn't see these as being very, some of these as being very fun either. For example, eating one meal a day. And some may really exert themselves in meditation practice, so perhaps not lying down at night. So at the end of a long day of travel, they may even stay in a sitting position, even if they do go to sleep, for example, but not lie down, is a method for training the mind and the body to go beyond the defilements of mind and desires and so on, putting things down to be able to focus more on the meditation practice. And then whatever walking they do, be a long walking meditation, one form or another. So these are the various perspectives and ideas about it. And sometimes monks do find it helpful, actually, to have one or more lay people or a novice with them for various reasons along the trip. One of which being, for example, in a place like America, where it can be uncertain whether or not you'll receive any alms food. A novice or a layperson can actually carry food to offer to the monk. This is just one idea of why it might be helpful. But also, if a layperson would like the opportunity to kind of intensify their practice or see a different aspect of the practice, and the monk didn't think it were a distraction, that the layperson had the kind of right mindset for it, then the monk might agree to having a layperson coming along as a way of supporting the layperson's practice as well. So these are some ideas I can offer about that consideration.
Thank you, John. Okay, S asks, how to effectively practice mudita? Is it specifically for jealousy?
So, first we need to have a good basis and understanding of metta first. So without metta, you cannot have mudita and you cannot have karuna. So the first thing that I would suggest is really establishing your practice very well and metta, right? The well-being, having this kind of goodwill towards all beings. Because if you don't have this basic kind of understanding of metta, of course you're going to be jealous. Of course you're going to be resentful, because you still don't see others as yourself, right? As I am, so are they. As they are, so am I. Taking this into consideration, one shouldn't kill or order another to kill for one. So this basic understanding of metta, that all beings want to be happy, is the requirement in order for you to be able not to be a hater, right? Not to hate on other people when they're successful, because now you see their happiness. It's no different from your own. When they become happy, it's like fulfilling your own happiness. So it's really about rejoicing, like we talk about anumodana, like rejoicing in other people's success, not only in the good actions that they do, but on the results. So we can rejoice both on the kamma, the punya kamma, kusala kamma that they're doing, and also on the kusala vipaka, kusala pala that they're doing. So when you see the good results coming to them, you don't start questioning them and criticizing it. Oh, they don't deserve it because they did this or because they did that. You're just, they're happy. They got some good results. Oh, that's great. That's great that they're happy, right? So it's really seeing that your aspiration of metta is being fulfilled, right? Your aspiration of others wanting to be happy is happening. It's happening right in front of your face, right? The only reason that you would be jealous is because you don't have metta. You still haven't recognized that yet, right? So metta is crucial. Without metta, you will not get there. That means you also have to practice karuna too, right? And then mudita. So there's like a progression that happens here. So if you don't have the first story of the building, you can't build the third story, which is the part of rejoicing in the success and well-being and happiness of others. But we don't want to focus too much on the people that are difficult for us, So I don't recommend that in the beginning, we focus on the lives of those people that are very difficult for us, because it's just gonna, even if they get something good, it's gonna be difficult for us. We're gonna be upset. We're gonna be jealous. We're gonna be resentful. So just try to, in the beginning, focus on the people who are easier for you to kind of, when you see them get some good fruits of their practice, that is easy for you to be happy for them. Usually it's like our mom, our dad, our children, our friends, our neighbors, maybe some coworkers here and there. So really focus on developing maybe your mudita practice there first, and then gradually expand it until you get to people that you just can't stand on the news, right? And then there's kind of like the threshold of where you to practice. But I would suggest just practice Brahma Viharas in general, and then there'll come a time where mudita gets fulfilled. Anyone? No?
That's great.
Okay.
Okay. Prairie asks, did the Buddha mention any Dhamma about how personality is formed, or how early memories of childhood affect people's personalities? Okay. Well, what, at least for me, and maybe the other venerables have thoughts, but what comes to mind for me on this issue is, in terms of childhood and people's personalities, which I understand is maybe more very common way of relating to the world today and maybe our habits. When I read the suttas, which is really our source for what the Buddha, himself would have taught, I don't see much mention of that. What is really fascinating is that I think there's a sutta called the Mahatanha Sankhaya Sutta, called the Greater Discourse on the Destruction of Craving. And in there's probably what is history's first recorded discussion of childhood development. Like if I had to guess, it's not 100% certain. But in there, the Buddha talks about a child growing up and they play with toys and how that is part of their development. And then their faculties mature and they start to take on kind of adult life. And then they start to form more rigid grasping and craving about things around their life. So there's actually a kind of discussion there. There's also discussion in the suttas about how children don't have certain fetters explicitly. For example, that they don't have, a child wouldn't have the idea that they exist as a separate entity. So that's probably one of the earliest, if not the earliest, discussions of like the development of child psychology. And the Buddha says that they have the underlying tendency towards the conceit, and then that will kind of sprout as they develop into an adult. But in terms of, so he does discuss child psychology in terms of playing with toys, which we, is important for development of just getting to know the world. And he also talks about the development of psychological structures, like the development of a sense of self in the world. But in terms of memories affecting you later on in life, he really only discusses it that I know of in terms of our ethical conduct or our moral behavior. So he does say, for example, someone who, they kill and they steal and they lie and they do all kinds of unethical things, then that will affect them psychologically. And so there's a lot of discussion about that and how someone might live in regret, they might live in remorse, they might live in shame and guilt. And obviously, if as a, whether it was as a child or whether it was as an adult, that is part of our past. So if someone has a childhood where they're breaking a lot of the precepts, then that's going to be something that the Buddha is kind of indirectly saying. Obviously, that would count in terms of memories affecting us later on, but it's not really specific to childhood. And I would also add that while this isn't necessarily discussed directly, there might be certain stories around past life karma affecting a child's conduct, right? So I don't think the Buddha would specifically say, I can't remember any spot in the discourses where he specifically says, this person as a child, they had these characteristics because of their past life. But he might say, it's kind of implicit, it's implied in the Buddhist teachings on karma that certain characteristics and qualities and abilities and affinities and so on will be related to past life karma. And then you also have a tradition of Jataka stories, right? Past life stories. And in these past life stories, it's assumed that there are certain characteristics that are kind of progressing, or at least within the story itself, there will be characteristics that are carried over. And so that is not early childhood and later. It's actually like early childhood and before early childhood. Because from the Buddhist perspective, it's not that there is an afterlife, it's that this is the afterlife, right? So sometimes I think certain ways that we relate to the world might be related to how we're raised in terms of thinking about time. And usually there's thinking like there's a beginning, we're created in the beginning at this life, and then we go on to life. Whereas from the Buddhist perspective, I don't know if that's necessarily your background, but a lot of people do have that idea, for example, in the West, or just any culture that's not kind of embedded in an idea of reincarnation or rebirth. So from the Buddhist perspective, early childhood is, it's not highlighted so much in the early texts, because I think that there's more an understanding of a person's character developing from there, and that they do have a past before that. But I don't think that it would deny that we are influenced by our parents. I don't know if, that's what comes to mind for me, though, in terms of this. And in terms, I guess, about how personality is formed, I think I touched on that with the ethics. Do the other venerables?
I wonder if maybe it'd be interesting to hear about some aspects of how it's understood culturally in Thailand. It's the relationships between parent and child. While everyone seems to understand that parents have an influence on their children's personality and their development, that it's the emphasis is on for the parents to understand their responsibility to the children to raise them well. We find scriptural basis in this, where the Buddha actually lays out the responsibilities of parents to their children, but also for the children to recognize their debt of gratitude to the parents for all the positive things that they do for them. And this is actually, I think, something you can see in the Buddhist teachings on other subjects as well, that that there are skillful and unskillful ways of looking at things. And the Buddha tries to draw our attention oftentimes, maybe always, to looking at it from a skillful point of view. And so if we look at aspects of our development that we may not like, for example, then there's the teaching on karma. We are the owners of our actions and dependent upon our actions. We can use this to help us develop equanimity with regard to our present circumstances as a natural cause and effect process playing out, dependent upon our past actions, and also encourage ourselves to engage in skillful behaviors so that future consequences will be positive for us. And there's emphasis in the suttas and in like Thai society, for example, where I was ordained in Thailand, as I mentioned, for the children to recognize the debt of gratitude that they have to their parents. This is a skillful way of interacting with one's parents. Another way of looking at it is, from another perspective, is that we don't know that parents do have such an important impact on our development, and yet we don't know who our parents in our next lives are going to be. And they, in turn, will have an important impact on our personalities and our development. We tend to identify so strongly with our personalities, but if we think about the conditionality of it, that important aspects of our personalities come from how we were socialized when we were very young. And then in our next lives, we may have substantially different personalities due to these conditions and so on. And so we can have this perspective of not self with regard to our personalities, and also consider that we should engage as many skillful behaviors as possible and minimize unskillful behaviors so that we have a good environment in our next life, whether it's our parents or schooling, the social environment we find ourselves in, etc., to help us further along the spiritual path.
Okay, and Hema asks another question. Dear Venerables, how long do devas live? What do they eat? Are they always happy? Can we meet them somewhere on Earth? Maybe because Hema asked another one, we can do this briefly to give room to others.
Okay, so
So how long do devas live?
Which devas?
Okay, yes.
They all live different lengths, So some of them, we can say like billions and billions of years, many eons. Some of them, just like thousands of years compared to here. So it really depends on which level of devas we're talking about. But it's ridiculous to, compare a deva life to a human life. They live very long lives, also very pleasant lives, where they don't experience much suffering. So in that kind of sense, in that ultimate happiness, they are relatively happy all the time. What do they eat? It also, I think, depends on the level of devas. Some of them seem to there's these gardens and stuff like that and all this stuff around where it seems like they eat. And I think most of them don't even have to really eat or anything like that. It's more about enjoying. It's not eating out of necessity because they don't have real bodies that will go bad. So they just enjoy their lives through seeing, touching, smelling. Like everything's pleasant in different degrees of pleasantness. And yes, you can meet some because there's some earthbound devas, right? So I like to think about them like fairies and stuff like that. They live in the trees and they live in the mountains and in the rivers. So there's these kind of terrestrial devas that are also around, and they appear much in the suttas when you read these stories, especially once you get into like Dhammapada stories and Jataka stories and these kind of things. You start seeing more of these earthbound devas. Can you meet them somewhere? Can you meet them? I mean, if you develop your mind, you could probably develop the ability to see them. I mean, I think it'd be kind of frightening if they would just appear out of nowhere. You have like this huge bright light that's blinding. I don't think that would be a very pleasant experience for you. Or if this, you see this energy come out of a tree or something like that, I think most people would be scared. So just be careful what you wish for. I don't think it might not turn out to be as a pleasant experience as you want it to be, or you thought that it was going to be.
Maybe I could recommend a source for information about this kind of thing. The sutras don't have very much information. Well, the sutras do have some information about it. For example, lifespans and so on like that. And there are various encounters between monks and the Buddha and devas. And some of them actually gave us teachings that we have now preserved in our scriptures. Another source would be the two books in the Ajahn Mun lineage, the biography of Ajahn Mun, and in a book called Patipada, which describes the mode of practice of Ajahn Mun, both written by Ajahn Mahabua. And many stories are included about beings from various realms of existence, ghosts as well as devas and so on. And so it's a topic that can't be covered concisely because there are so many different types of devas. And you've asked several questions about them. Those are two very good sources, I think.
Gotcha. Okay, we have another question from S, which maybe if we agree, we cover briefly, just because S usually has a lot of questions.
Yes.
I don't know if other people will have. sometimes when I show benevolence to people, I feel some will take it as being too soft and ignore my feelings. But when I don't care about them too much, they become much nicer to me. What should I do in this case? So they show benevolence to people,
Mhm.
and they feel people will take it as being too soft and ignore their feelings. But when they don't care about them much, they become nicer. I see. So something about maybe people are less empathetic when you're very nice to them and more empathetic when you're less.
I try not to let my behavior be dictated by what other people do. That's like my general philosophy, So I don't get into this transactional kind of behavior or relationships like, oh, I'm nice to you, now you should be nice to me, or when you're nice to me, then I'll be nice to you. That's not the way I think about it. I'm like, it's important for me to be nice. It's important for me to be compassionate. It's important for me to be kind. It's important for me to be wise for my own sake. That's your karma over there. Like, I'm not really worried about you. The only time I take other people's behavior and speech and stuff into consideration is whether it's dangerous to me, right? So I'm not going to purposely put myself in a dangerous situation. If I know that person is dangerous or unskillful person, or they have bad habits that rub off on me, then I move away. But I'm not nice expecting other people to be nice to me. And I'm not going to let other people's behavior dictate my own behavior. So that's what I do for myself, for my own peace of mind, because I have a certain kind of goal that I'm trying to reach. And it can be difficult when, you're just, people don't acknowledge the good things that you're doing, or people take advantage of it. And it's not necessarily to say that you have to let them do it. I mean, there's always an option not to be around them, right? To remove yourself from them. So I would just say don't focus on being reciprocated, or, having this kind of conditioned morality where it depends on what other people do to me. I'll practice only to the extent that other people reciprocate. I don't think that's the right way to go about the practice. And also, there's always the option to move away from them. I don't know if the Venerables have anything else to say.
Well, yeah, I once had a similar problem, and I mentioned it to my teacher, who had encouraged me to practice loving kindness meditation as a consistent meditation object, and he says, well, if you keep practicing loving kindness meditation, then you won't care.
Yeah, that's true.
And and so you didn't mention about how it makes you feel, these kinds of reactions you get from people, but I wonder if it may be an aspect of it, and because it did bother me a little bit, some of the reactions I got from other people. And I found that if I also focus on practicing loving kindness for myself, then that made me feel good, and other people's opinions and reactions and so on like this didn't matter as much to me. Another thing you can do is you can use this kind of information you're getting, this kind of feedback, if you will, you're getting from people to help you develop wisdom about how to interact with different people skillfully. Because what constitutes being nice, for example, kind of depends on who you're interacting with and what works with them, And so you can also see it as a way of developing wisdom along the way. I think.
Okay. John has a question. How can we love or care about others without becoming attached? I think this is related to what we've been discussing, the other Venerables have discussed with metta and mudita in the Brahma Viharas, or sometimes called the Apamanya, the measureless or boundless minds. I think it's a little... Really, I think the Buddhist answer is metta, loving kindness. That's really love. In the Western tradition, there's also a discussion of different types of love, right? And metta is the Buddhist, or it's not actually even specifically Buddhist. It's a pan-Indian concept, the Jains and the Brahmins, and it's also popular in India, and it's found in Christianity as well. So I think that's where the answer is. I recommend... Actually, I won't say this, but there's a sutta where Brahmins, they go to the Buddha and they say, they have an argument about how to reach Brahma, basically how to be born in heaven with God, which in this context basically means like a creator God or an eternal God. And the Buddha, at first, he kind of, in a sense, criticizes them. He says, have you seen this Brahma? Has your teacher seen this Brahma? Have any of their teachers seen this Brahma? And they say no. And he says, well, he gives a series of similes saying, well, it's like building a flight of stairs to a building in the middle of the street where there is no building to be seen. You have no idea where you're going. And then he asks them. So he kind of criticizes them, but then the Buddha gets them to draw out their own wisdom. And he asks them, well, what are the qualities of this Brahma? And he asks, for example, are the qualities of love, of this unattached, unconditional, boundless love? So yes, well, he says, well, then you know that if you develop that quality in yourself, you're developing the qualities of God. So you see that you're connecting yourself with God. So then you can find union with God in this way. So if you're more familiar with that concept of boundless love in the sense of kind of a divine quality, like this divine, loving, impartial kindness and benevolence and care, that's what metta is really supposed to be. It's not like a waving to your neighbor, but not really caring. It's like the type of love that Christians say, God loves you, or Jesus loves you, or Brahma loves you, or the Buddha himself kind of dwelling in this compassion for the entire world. It's a very divine quality. It's not something cold or frigid or superficial. So from the Buddhist perspective, that is what unattached love is. It's wishing that all beings be free of suffering, that all beings be well, all beings be happy and healthy, that like a mother loves her only child but in this metaphor, towards all beings impartially, not like just for her child and not other children. So in this case, it's towards all beings, wanting them to be well. That's the Buddhist perspective on like unattached or unconditional love.
No, I hope you'll forgive me. I think actually that it doesn't necessarily imply being unattached. While the ideal is unconditional and being impartial and loving all beings as we do ourselves, that don't necessarily. I haven't seen myself in the scriptures the implication that it would be unattached. And I think I found in my personal practice also that actually it can develop that. That and so we have to use our wisdom with it. And so there's some different opinions, which can happen in monk chat, which can make monk chat maybe more interesting as well. So, so maybe if I present just that a little bit, this other idea a little bit, that attachment can develop in that way. That if we look at something like, for example, anger or hatred, that these also are associated with attachment. Jealousy and fear as well, and so on, like this. And if we use loving kindness as an antidote, we can displace these defilements, this kind of dirt in the mind of these negative qualities. But we may also find ourselves developing some attachment to the person in other ways, towards people or other beings in other ways. And so I think that to be alert to that is important. And to see to what extent do I have goodwill towards other people, and to what extent am I developing a kind of an emotional dependence on their well-being also, an attachment to them, and so on. And if we also practice some letting go, one set of contemplations the Buddha said that all people should do frequently is the 5 subjects for frequent recollection. These include the recollections of old age, disease, and death. As well as that we will be separated from all that we hold dear. This includes the people and other living beings in our lives, and the 5th one being that we're all the owners of our karma, our kamma. And this is a contemplation, that can motivate us to do good things, but also enables us to have a more equanimous mind that cause and effect relationships play out. And so I think being attentive to recollecting these 5 subjects frequently, as the scriptures recommend, is very helpful in letting go of attachments that we may develop in many ways, including through loving kindness practice. Something I can offer.
I just wanted to bring up 2 things that I found useful. One is to let go of these 2 kind of ideas. One is of ownership, and the other one of control. Right? So if we let go of the ownership, like my mom, my dad, my kids, my this, my that, right? They belong to me, right? If you're able to that is the problem, right? There's where all the pain comes when you say that. There's many suttas where the Buddha talks about like kings experiencing pain, or someone comes and they lost someone or someone's sick, and the Buddha gives like an explanation, and at the end it's because that person is saying, well, this one's my person, it's my mom, it's my dad, that's why so much pain is brought to me. And the Buddha goes, well, isn't that a reason why the loved ones are the source of our suffering? And the person kind of gets shocked, because we usually think about our loved ones as a source of our happiness, and it's not the person in themselves. The person is not the problem, right? It's that they're mine. I'm the owner, like they belong to me. That's why they suffer, right? If it was some other random person, then it would, unfortunately, so many people die every day around the world, but we're not all suffering and crying, right? And we know about it. It's not, we just turn on the news and we see it, and it's not, just out of sickness, old age, and death, but it doesn't affect us the same way. Why? Because we don't have any possessiveness over them, right? So it's this aspect of possessiveness. And then the other one is control, wanting that person to be a certain way, right? Like we talked about earlier, reciprocating, right? Then that brings suffering when we expect them to be a certain way, to stay a certain way. One of the criticisms in relationships is, you've changed. Right? Of course they've changed. Everything changes, right? Anicca Vata Sankhara, that's just the nature of things. I hope that they changed for the better, right? That they've changed for the better. Yeah, so change is part. If you think that the impermanent is permanent, then dukkha, the Buddha said, right? So when you try to control someone and lock them into a certain place, they need to be a certain way, especially to me, then you're going to suffer. So if we let go of our possessiveness and our desire to control, then we'll be able to experience that boundless loving kindness, the unconditioned loving kindness. And I think that will help you understand how to work with like this kind of negative view of attachment that we have in these situations. When we talk about attachment, I think we're talking about how we suffer because we try to control and we try to possess our loved ones.
Okay. Lydia asks, I did not understand the explanation this morning to Sud's question regarding how the sutta seems to contradict the teaching of being heir to our karma. Could you rephrase the answer? So I think this is related to the sharing of merit. How can sharing of merit coincide with being the owners of our own karma? Or are you Bante?
Heirs of our... I think sometimes, I'm not sure exactly because I'm trying to remember the question exactly the way it was phrased. But I think sometimes we think that there's like a literal sharing of karma, right? Like there's like a stock exchange or trading that's going on, right? And I'm like sending you some Venmo credit over, something like that. That is not what's happening. That is not what's happening at all. So most of the time what's happening for all beings besides pretas, besides the hungry ghost, is actually we're inviting them to rejoice with us, to rejoice in the happiness. So they gain benefit by seeing us do something good, and the happiness that arises from them seeing us do something good is the merit that we're sharing, right? So it's not a literal sharing of merit, although we translate it as that sometimes, but it's just like, oh wow, they recognize this goodness and they become happy, and that makes them happy that that you're doing something happy. It's kind of like mudita or something like that. So it's that anumodana. For the pretas, they have this, it appears, from the suttas that we shared, that there's this special thing going on where someone offers on their behalf, right? On their behalf, and they're able to receive the benefits of that, but only if they're your family members up to 7 generations, right? So it's not necessarily that it could just be done for anyone. There's a special category for our parents that they're able to get some relief from their suffering. So I don't think from what I remember, there's no actual thing that it says like their karma is impacted. It just says that they suffer less, because they're always suffering as hungry ghosts. So this kind of brings some relief. So I don't think it's an actual like cure. I think what we're doing is kind of like a symptom relief, right? Like we're kind of giving them something so it's not so painful while they're there, while they work out their karma. And I do remember like in funeral ceremonies in the Sri Lankan tradition, people will offer like a white sheet. So where if they're, because they know the pretas don't wear any clothes, right? So they're thinking, oh, they have nothing to wear when they go. This will help them where they go. Obviously, the sheet never leaves the temple. It's always there, right? They don't get to use it. And it doesn't help them escape their karma from being in the preta world. They have to stay there. But it's an attempt to bring them some relief while they're there, right? So it's the same way in the human realm. We cannot escape our karma. If someone's suffering, they can't escape their karma. But we can do something to provide relief from their karma, right? We just don't let them like die in front of us. Oh, that's your karma. Too bad. No, we try to do something. We try to help. We interfere. We can't deal with the root cause of their karma, but we can do something to bring relief, something to assist them. So that's the way that I see these ceremonies. Especially when it comes to the pretas, it's some way that we can do something for them, but not necessarily, we're not changing their karma. That's not possible because, as you were alluding to, we can't, everyone's the owner of their own karma. So we can still have both things where we experience our own karma and someone else can help us and interfere. So the karma is not as strong. We don't experience the results, the vipaka, the pala, as strong. I don't know if the other venerables have any other ideas.
It's an interesting topic because from one point of view, I think because the idea of sharing merit doesn't show up in the Pali Suttas. I've been told, but I've never seen it, and I wonder, as you've been doing readings, so maybe a question quickly before I go into what I was thinking of saying is that you've been doing readings from the Peta Watu, and as I recall, there are verses coming from the Peta Watu, so brief bits that actually technically are part of the Sutta Pitaka, and then there are stories from the commentaries about why this came about, and so on, why the Buddha said these things, or why the Peta said these things, and so on. And is the concept of sharing merit, I wonder, does it show up in the verses of the Peta Watu itself? Do you recall?
But I don't know if exactly that kind of wording is used, but it does talk about doing these ceremonies for them.
It does, okay.
It does say like doing this for them, and specifically giving to the Sangha.
Okay.
But like the mechanisms of how that works, I haven't really seen that explained. Okay. Yes.
Okay. Then sharing merits as an idea, as a regular practice, as something as a recommendation, comes up in the commentaries. I think in the written down in Sri Lanka about 1,000 years after the Buddha passed away, and it becomes kind of a doctrine that you, or it shows up as a doctrine in the commentaries, I should say. So it probably developed over a long period of time, and it's an important part of Theravadan practice in Thailand, I think in Burma as well. I did see it when I was a monk in the Burmese forest tradition years ago. And I was in Burma for a short time as well. And the idea is, one of the things Bhante Vihari said that really resonated was that the idea isn't that you can give somebody else your karma, but the sharing merit helps alleviate their suffering from whatever karma that they're experiencing. And it manifests differently for different beings. So ghosts, for example, as a result, might receive food and clothing and other things like this if you share merit with them and if they can receive that merit. But actually, according to the Thai meditation masters in the culture in Thailand, they can it actually can be even more dramatic than that. Because ghosts have what amount to basically energy bodies, they can be very highly malleable, and so it can actually allow them a quick rebirth into a different realm. And so if you're able to share a lot of merit with a ghost, for example, they could even be reborn as a day one. This is a concept that came up in one of the Mahayana sutras you read today, about even the Devas being reborn, or ghosts being reborn in the Deva realms. But there's also the culture that if you share merit with other living beings, say human beings, they can have an experience of pleasure. So they might experience rapture or calm or mental strength or something like this. So for example, if we were to share merit with you, or if I were to share merit with the other monks who might have an experience like this somehow is commensurate to the merit that I'm sharing, the merit of the karma that I'm sharing with you that I determine, whether it's all merit or some smaller portion or something like that. And this can help relieve suffering that you're experiencing, or it can motivate you to do good things or something like that. And so it also has its uses and its benefits as well. And so Devas also can receive merit and enjoy doing so according to this way of thinking. And but it doesn't actually change their karma, and you can't give them your karma, so they can't experience the results of the good things that you've done. But they can have an experience of, so human beings have an experience of pleasure, as I was describing. And ghosts, because of their particular situation, if they can receive your merit, then they can experience some what are actually tangible benefits for them, or even a better rebirth. So it varies a little bit from class of being to another class of being.
Okay, then Naga asks how to deal with self-hatred according to Buddhism. Well, I mean, I guess I could start. I think a few things. I mean, we've talked about metta quite a lot in some detail, and also making merit. And I think those are the two main strategies, really. Um, self-hatred can be due, I think it can be due to a lot of things, but a lot of it boils down to similar things, which is why the problem can be approached from a similar perspective. But the first thing could be good to just figure out what is the dialogue going on in your mind about why you find yourself hating yourself. Because sometimes the solution can be different. Let's say that you have, because it's hard to speculate too much, but just to give an example, it's like if someone really hates themselves, it could be irrational or it could actually be due to like a lack of morality. And if it's irrational, then the way you solve it might be a little bit different. Now, always doing moral things and practicing metta, that will always help you. It'll always help you because then you are building a foundation, which then you can reflect on to help your self-esteem, right? So if you do good acts, you're generous, you follow ethical principles, and you also practice loving kindness meditation for yourself and others, then all of those good intentions and those wholesome actions, you can reflect on those and you can reflect on the qualities that you're developing. And that can provide you with a basis of feeling like an ethical, wholesome, healthy person. It's kind of like eating nutritious food for your mind, right? For your heart. It just eats this nutritious, wholesome things that you do. And so we feed on that for our self-esteem. And our mind can become very depraved and starved if we deprave it of those wholesome intentions. Especially when we get, sometimes there's a division that can be skillful. We can kind of talk about this. It's not an absolute thing between maybe like the heart and kind of a very rational, discursive way of thinking, right? And if the mind becomes very, very discursive and devoid of these kind of nourishing, wholesome qualities, then sometimes it can be very critical and sharp and aversive towards itself and towards others, right? Because it's kind of like using this faculty, the critical faculty, critical thinking. Well, what does critical thinking do? It critiques. And what is critiquing? Well, it's basically being, pointing out flaws. So if we are very good at critiquing things, then we might start to fall into that habit of like hatred towards ourselves and others. And so sometimes we need to nourish the heart away from fault finding, even though that can be a skillful ability in order to discern. But we need to sometimes nourish other qualities, like just letting go of our opinions about how things should or shouldn't be, or what the status of ourselves and others is, and just reflecting on the good things, just letting go of the bad things and we're focusing on the good things. But sometimes self-hatred, it can really be patterns of thinking that you could be a very moral person, you could be a very loved person, you could have a good environment, you could be following the precepts and practicing meditation, and you just find yourself hating yourself or low self-esteem. And in that case, I think that probably what would be good is really reflecting and working on that to the best of your ability, not pushing yourself too far to the point where it becomes too challenging and it can, pushing spots that are too sensitive, but reflecting on that and trying to work it out. So trying to understand that, first of all, this is an unwholesome pattern. So it's something that is causing you suffering that you want to let go of, right? We have to kind of shed the light on that, because sometimes I think this type of thinking, it can kind of arise because the mind thinks that it's somehow helping you. Like, this is something I've reflected on sometimes when I have critical thinking, is like, that my mind is thinking like this because it actually wants me to be safe. It wants me to be protected. So it's kind of producing these thoughts that might actually be painful, like thoughts of anxiety or thoughts of worry or thoughts of critiquing. But actually the mind is trying to point this out because it's like it's a danger light, right? It's trying to protect you. And so then, and then you see like, my mind is just misguided. It's actually trying to express this care, this innate care that I want to be happy, but it doesn't know how to do it properly. So it's doing it via these unwholesome, painful experiences like anxiety or like whatever the emotion may be, self-hatred in this case. So sometimes negative emotions, they're kind of the result of an untrained mind not knowing how to protect itself. And so I think that a lot of times those cases you can investigate using the food of your good, wholesome conduct and your thoughts of well-wishing to reflect. And on that basis, kind of analyzing, okay, what is going on here, right? Why is my mind thinking this? Allowing it to naturally come to the light and expose itself and kind of share what its real intentions are, to speak metaphorically. Sometimes we can't force it out of the way, but we have to develop our wisdom. We have to watch it and learn from it over time. Because a lot of the problem with these types of thoughts, I think, is because they get so ingrained that we start to just let them go on autopilot and we don't question them. And so we need to start stopping them. They're kind of like stopping them from entering the city and checking their ID and say, okay, what are you doing here? You're trying to get in the city and kind of mess everything up for no good reason. So one of the similes the Buddha gives for mindfulness is like a gatekeeper at the gate of a city who watches, and he knows who to let in and who not to let in, right? And this is part of our practice of right effort. So preventing unwholesome qualities and developing wholesome qualities, with mindfulness as kind of the watch for discerning what's wholesome and what's unwholesome, and keeping the mind steady in that practice. And so sometimes with these thoughts, which are on autopilot, we really need to give the gatekeeper some additional advice. Like, you need to watch out for this person, and you need to really be careful for that person, because they look like friends, they seem like citizens, but they're not. They're untrustworthy. They're spies, right? So in this case, the thoughts, the thinking pattern, the self-hatred, the emotions that arise, they might be verbal or subverbal. They also might be like physical related, certain bodily behaviors or social behaviors that manifest. We need to investigate those very carefully and learn when they start to arise. And then we start to apply our mindfulness and our gentle watching and exposing them and learning the underlying kind of force or momentum of those behaviors, those emotions and thoughts, and then learning to let those go. But we can't force it, right? Unfortunately, we can't force it. It has to be a process of seeing and letting go, like exposing. And then once we expose, they start to go away. Kind of like when you expose someone for doing something bad and then we say they're caught red-handed, right? Or say like they're caught with the hands in the dough. That type of phrase, it's kind of like once we expose someone, then they're caught and then they can start to go away. But in this case, it's actually much more gentle. It's not like catching a thief and kind of wrestling them out of the area. With the mind, it's actually the opposite. With the body, we apply this very forceful, right, approach. And with criminals, we kind of maybe have this attitude of like, I'm going to catch them and I'm going to get them. But actually, we need to more apply the mentality of rehabilitation and gentleness and loving kindness towards our own mind, our own self, right? Speaking just, generally here. So exposing those thoughts and watching them and learning from them and really hearing them. This is just my opinion from what I've practiced with this, is like really listening, to what they're saying, but not listening in the sense of like believing the self-hatred, but just like if someone else were to talk to you about their problems and you really care, but you are not experiencing those problems, but you really want to help them. In the same way, I really think that the mind, it has these patterns that build up and they just need to be heard, kind of like a child incessantly speaking. And until they're heard and listened to and understood, then they'll keep coming back. But we can't get mixed up in them. So those are a few thoughts of kind of general perspectives. I wonder if the better was great
stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So John has a question. How should we find and maintain good friendship? How to deal with loneliness when good friends aren't around?
Well, by Buddhist standards, good friends would be people who are help us develop good qualities within ourselves. It says in the suttas that one who is wise is one who speaks in favor of faith, and who speaks in praise of giving, and speaks in praise of morality, and speaks in praise of wisdom. These are things that wise people love and they promote, and their actions would naturally be in line with these. It may be difficult to find someone. Sometimes it can be difficult to find someone who appreciates all of these different qualities, and we may not agree with them in every aspect of their understanding of these qualities either. But if we look for people who have at least an appreciation of some of these and some aspects of them, then these can be the basis of relationships with them, at least along with these kinds of qualities, and we can see if associating with them will help us to develop in these qualities as well. We also have to be sensitive to the fact that associating with people who are different from us also can be helpful. It can be helpful in terms of our personal growth, and can bring things out of us that we didn't know were there, for example, and this kind of thing can make us think differently about things. But we want to associate with people who have an appreciation for some or all of these qualities. And people who don't really appreciate any of these qualities, we may not really find very helpful to our own spiritual growth. We may not find associating with them very fulfilling. So if one finds the teachings of the Buddha inspiring on matters like these, then you may find that associating with a Buddhist community would be helpful in terms of finding good friends. So I don't know where you are and what's available to you, but there are many resources online about what organizations there are, what communities there are in various areas, and so you can see what kind of activities they have that you can get involved with, so you can develop relationships with people. Say the kind of the ideal of this the beautiful friend, as is said in the Pali, the Kalyana Mitta, is someone who helps us develop in good qualities, and they're also actually kind of at the level of like a teacher, the ultimate Kalyana Mitta. And so the Buddha is kind of the paragon of this, and he's presented this way in the suttas as the Kalyana Mitta. He says to Ananda, Kalyana Mitta, the beautiful friend, is the whole of the holy life. For example, just consider if you hadn't known me, where would you be? And so if we can find a Kalyana Mitta like this, someone who can really teach us, out of loving kindness and compassion, with wisdom, and this is kind of the ultimate beautiful friend also.
So I'd just like to talk about the loneliness one, because sometimes I like to deal with things in a joking manner to make light of it, So people often come up to me, Bhante, because I spent most of COVID by myself over a year at our meditation center. And like, Bhante, didn't you feel lonely? You were by yourself. Didn't you feel so lonely? I said, no, I was with my favorite person, myself, So I'm never lonely because I'm with like the person that I adore and cherish the most, right? Is myself, right? I care about myself a lot. I love myself a lot. I have a lot of compassion towards myself. I rejoice in my own success a lot, right? So I'm never alone because I always have myself, right? And I have this good relationship with myself, right? So I think that's a kind of like an unforgotten aspect of being lonely, right? So if you're really content with yourself, I mean, there's no need for anyone else, right? That's why we talk about in the Dhamma about contentment, and if you can't find any good friends, just wander alone like the rhinoceros, right? And all the rhinoceros suttas and all the similes about the lone elephant and all these kind of lone animals. And it's not really about that you need to separate yourself. The way I read those suttas is like, I'm just good on my own. Like I don't need anything, right? There's not this vacuum. There's not this want in me because I'm fulfilled. I'm content. And so when one is content and fulfilled, the one is, knows that they're living to the best of their ability and they're generating wholesome states and they're not harming others. Like there's really no need for anyone else. So it's very easy to be by oneself. So sometimes when we're looking for others, it's kind of like maybe a indicator that, we should kind of evaluate the relationship we have to ourselves and how we treat ourselves, right? And the things that we need to develop within ourselves, because we can't always have someone around, right? We can't always have someone around. So our own happiness can't be dependent on others, even on having good friends. Even the Buddha went into Mahaparinibbana. All the Arahants went into Mahaparinibbana. I'm going to lose all these great venerables here one day. And, everything that I love and cherish is going to be gone. So what do I have? Only my actions, right? I only have this, myself, in that sense of my actions. So we have to create a good self. So then we don't have to find our happiness, right, outside. We can find it inside. So that's the way I like to approach this topic, is just really focusing on yourself and being your best friend.
Okay, and Shelley has a question. How can we deal with our fear of losing our parents, and how can we prepare ourselves for the loss of parents in the future?
So letting go really is going to be an important aspect of it. Letting go refers to our emotional attachments to people and to things, and really everything. It refers to the emotional attachments that we have. And so while we have parents and we have responsibilities to them, and they may be a wonderful aspect of our lives, um, and we don't want to avoid them or something like this, we want to evaluate the kind of emotions we have with relation to them. If we have loving kindness and a sense of gratitude, these are very skillful emotions that feel good, and they motivate us to do skillful things, which are a good karma for ourselves and have a beneficial impact on them as well. But when we think about the possibility of losing them, and when we feel the pain within ourselves, and we see that this is a symptom of the emotional attachment I have, and then that's an indicator that there's an area there where we can let go, and it would behoove us to let go of emotional attachment. And one way to do this is the as I mentioned earlier, the 5 subjects for frequent recollection, and these come up again. The recollection that I am subject to aging, I have not gone beyond aging, and I am subject to disease, I have not gone beyond getting sick, and I am subject to death, I have not gone beyond dying. And then the recollection that everything that is dear and pleasing to me will change and will be separated from me. And then the 5th one, that I am the owner of my actions and the dependent on my actions. And whatever I do, whether it's good or bad, of that I will be the heir. These are the 5 subjects that, according to the suttas, the Buddha said that everyone should recollect frequently. And so if we recollect these frequently, over time, they kind of seep into the heart. The heart comes to realize the truth of these, and slowly over time seeks, how can I interact skillfully with these realities of life? What can I do? One aspect of karma that we see in the 5th recollection, that we're the owners of our actions, is that these recollections are in and of themselves very good karma. And they can reflecting on our karma can motivate us to perform good acts of karma, as I mentioned, for example, in relation to loving kindness or gratitude. We also can look at practicing loving kindness for ourselves. When we feel sad, when we feel lonely, when we feel pain, when we feel anxiety about the future, we can practice loving kindness meditation towards ourselves. Or perhaps another kind of meditation, such as the meditation on breathing. Breath meditation, which can be a regular practice for us every day anyway. And if we practice this, it's very calming to the heart, and it's very nourishing to the heart. And it helps us also to see what kinds of emotions come up, what kinds of thoughts do I have, what are my fears for the future, and what are my concerns, for example, just being one aspect of this. And when the mind is calm, say, for example, towards the end of a meditation session, then we also can reflect on these 5 qualities, not qualities, but realities, the 5 subjects for frequent recollection, maybe one of them or multiple of them, because when the heart is calmer, we'll seek in deeper, and we can come more to terms with what is happening. We can see what kinds of emotions come up and so on. And so this is a kind of a long kind of dance that we do. It isn't something that we can resolve quickly. There are no quick tips, or tricks for dealing with these very, big issues in life, fundamental problems, you could say, in life. But how to overcome suffering in the long run, it takes a long dance, you might say, with our partner in life, our own hearts, and learning from our heart and teaching the heart. and learning to dance with it so that we can dance beautifully through life over time.
But there's one thing that I've noticed with a lot of the kids, of the people who are passing away. So a lot of, and in my work in the Sri Lankan community, has been working with the children of the first generation immigrants. And I mean, the first generation that came to the U.S., a lot of them are very old or have passed away already. So I'm always having to go to the hospital, and usually the person passing away, they have a lot of saddha, so they're really not worried. You know, the very like older Sri Lankan people, they're very confident. They're like, I did what I needed to do. But their children, you know, in their 30s, 40s, and 50s who are there, they have a lot of regret. A lot of regret, right? They're like, I spent so much time studying and working, and I kind of neglected my parents to pursue the American dream. So I think here, when we think about our parents, what can we do is to be diligent, appamada, right? Not to neglect our duty towards our parents, not to neglect the things that should be done, the things that we need to do, our responsibilities and duties to them. And, you know, maybe if you had the idea of taking them on a vacation, don't postpone that. Like, if you wanted to take them on a vacation, take them on a vacation. If you ever wanted to tell them how you feel about them, how much you love them, how much you appreciate it, now is the time to tell them. Don't leave things for tomorrow, right? They can die tonight. Any of our loved ones can die tonight. So don't postpone any of these things. Do whatever you need to do. Do it now, because if you don't do it, you'll have a lot of regrets. And it's kind of difficult to deal with, very difficult to deal with it after, when you can't change anything, right? Once they're gone, there's nothing you can do. So you're going to have to carry all of that with you. So don't wait for that, right? Don't wait for that to happen. Now, act now. You know, if you can call your mom or dad tonight, please call them and just check in on them. Like, how are you? How's it going? How was your day? Right? Like, don't leave that for later. So just, you know, be diligent, appamada. Don't postpone. Don't wait. As the Buddha said, if not, you'll regret it in the future if you do so.
Maybe one other thing I can add. This is beautiful. So thanks for saying that. I think another thing I might add is that it's natural human beings will grieve when their parents pass away. And even before that, we see them going through the struggles of old age and disease, you know, as well, and whatever hardships they have in life, whatever suffering they have in life. And it's natural that all human beings will grieve over this. And only really the enlightened are beyond all attachments. And so I think one aspect of it is going to be also understanding that and accepting that, and not having aversion towards those kinds of emotions, and recognizing that it's natural. And so allowing yourself to grieve when you see the suffering of your parents, and then eventually when you're separated from them.
So Query asks, after some time of practicing Buddhism, I lost the interest of a lot of things other than reading suttas, doing meditation, discussing Dhamma, and staying at monasteries. Is that normal? What should I do?
It's kind of normal for us, I think.
Yeah. I was actually talking to someone recently about this. And yeah, it's very normal. It's very normal. And what should you do? Keep it up.
Yeah.
Just monitor if the only thing I would just briefly is like monitoring if you're getting bitter to the outside world. That's something we want to be careful of. Usually it's a natural progression. This happens. I would bet very likely that just give it some time, you'll be back to lay life. Relatively normal. There might be more of a balance, or you will maybe want to become a monastic, or you'll just become a very serious practitioner. Like it'll be a very normal part of your life after a certain time. It won't feel like you're missing something else. It'll just be who you are. You'll be very devoted and dedicated, or you'll go back, or you'll want to become a monk. Those are basically the only options, right? Is that because if we don't blend into society, and it's either we just accept that, and this is how we blend in by becoming this type of new person, or we go back, or we find a new way of being in society. So it's very normal, but just checking that you don't become too bitter. That this is something you do because you feel fulfilled and happy doing it, not because you feel like you must, or because you hate everything else. Buddhism becomes your refuge, right? I'm going to run off to the monastery because I hate the world type of attitude. Rather, it should be like, I'm going to run to the monastery because I love the monastery, not because I hate the world. I feel like ideally you would do this understanding that there's so many great things out there, but that you like this more. Like understanding the gratification of the world, not denying it and pretending like it's horrible. But understanding like, oh, there are all these gratifications, but this is what I want to do, right? That's the best attitude, in my opinion, for this. And as long as I think you maintain that, then yeah, keep it up.
It's a great answer. I think I wonder if you say, "What should you do?" As I recall at the end, you say, "What should I do?" I can't read it from here. I apologize.
Yeah,
but
what should I do?
What should you do? I wonder. It also has a very practical aspect to it, and I wonder if you'd like some more kind of practical guidance, about like, do you have a monastery? I think you mentioned you like to go to the monastery. Do you have the kind of supportive environment to capitalize upon this interest in the Dhamma, to take it further and further and experience more and more benefits from it? If you would like more practical guidance, don't hesitate to write in more about your personal situation and what possible avenues there are for you. See if we can give you some advice along those lines too.
This question is actually from 4 minutes after the live stream started. So we're still quite.
Oh wow! So let's find people that haven't had a chance.
So I don't know if they'll have time to.
Okay.
Maybe next time.
Future ones too.
Yeah, for future times. Yeah.
Let's prioritize people who haven't asked any questions yet that we haven't answered yet.
Okay, we have one from Rick here. Can you share some skillful ways to practice with times of dissociation due to complex trauma? Maybe Ponte, you have a psychology degree.
So actually, this is one thing that I've been studying for the last couple of years. There's one book that I recommend called Flowers in the Dark by Sister Dang from the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition, which very Buddhist informed way of working with trauma. And, sometimes people, disassociation is a very somatic experience. So maybe you kind of want to take a little break from, Kaya Nupassana, mindfulness of the body, mindfulness practices, body practices. And you want to work more with different things like maybe you want to work more with loving kindness and compassion, the Brahma Viharas, or maybe work more with like doing practicing dana and practicing sila and sutta and panya. So there's all these so many different ways that we can practice the Dhamma. It doesn't always have to look like, vipassana, anapanasati, satipatthana. Some of those, sometimes that kind of that very clear awareness of the body can trigger certain things like trauma. So we just need to be careful. So maybe for the time, we can just put that aside, right? And it's not that we're neglecting it. It's just that, for the time, this is we're still tender. We're too tender to deal with this. We need some time for healing. And we can practice some of the many other practices that are out there. And just because we're not practicing, like satipatthana, vipassana, and these kind of more insight mindfulness practice doesn't mean that we're not good practitioners. It doesn't make us any less practitioners. We just have to focus on some other part for the time being. So, and also be creative with your practice. Sometimes leave your eyes open. For a lot of people that have bodily trauma or experience some sort of like maybe violence or some other sort of abuse with the body, it helps them keeping their eyes open. It's a lot easier when they close their eyes. The experience is too much. It's too highlighted for them. It's too rough. So there's a book published on mindfulness and trauma that talks about this is one of the dangers when people first start mindfulness practice, and a lot of the facilitators or teachers are not aware of. They usually say, okay, sit down, close your eyes. They assume that everyone's okay with closing their eyes, but that's not necessarily the case. So you might want to keep your eyes open, and you might kind of maybe focus on external objects, be mindful of other objects. Maybe you can practice like kasina practices and things like that. And maybe if you notice that after 10 minutes is when this happens, then shorten your meditation to 5 minutes. So just give yourself permission to tailor the practice to yourself, and also explore other ways of practicing. It doesn't have to look the way you're practicing right now.
So we will prioritize people. Let's see, Rebecca for now. So Rebecca asks, what are your perspectives on the popularity of secular Buddhism in the U.S.?
Don't get me started.
Maybe you should. I don't know anything about the what's going on, modern trends in America. So much. I only go back to the States a little over a year ago, and so kind of monasteries. I wonder if either of you could talk to this.
Just imagine if I would say, what do you think about secular Islam? What do you think about secular Christianity? kind of like doesn't make any sense, right? But for some reason, for Buddhism, it makes sense, right? And that's because the way Buddhism was shared. Buddhism was there was a reaction within Buddhism to justify itself to the West, right? So and one way about doing this was to appeal to Western ideas, right, of like hyper rationality and being very philosophical and being scientific. So then when Westerners came in contact with it, they started picking these parts, and they thought, oh well, this is the essence of the Dhamma, this is the real Dhamma, this is the core, this is the heartwood, and basically we can jettison the rest. So we don't need all the other traditional stuff. We don't need that ethnically or culturally based parts of the Dhamma. We'll just take the heartwood, and that's what we'll call secular Buddhism. So we don't need monks, we don't need the Sangha. Actually, karma, we don't need karma either, rebirth, we don't need any of that. All that kind of stuff that's there, it's not really important. The most important part is the rational, scientific, empirical, right, logical, reasonable parts. That is really the heartwood. And these are all defined by the Western people themselves, right? So the Asian people don't really have a say in it. And the Asian people in themselves, are not free from what's happening. They themselves tailored it to be exported this way. D.T. Suzuki, the Japanese author of Zen, he very much presented Zen in a very palatable way for Westerners and excluded other parts. This is the reason why we don't find Pure Land Buddhism as popular in the West, because a more devotional practice. Look at the types of Buddhism that are popular in the West for most. One, Zen and Vipassana traditions, which tend to lean more towards this kind of view. So it's, we all kind of follow our own normal tendencies, and each culture, each individual has their own tendencies, what they like. But let's not confuse let's not confuse our own opinion and our own likes and dislikes for what the reality of what is being shared with us is. Buddhism has so many different dimensions, so many facets of it, and we should only take the parts that we like, right? Like cherry picking. Like, well, these are the parts that I like. These are the parts that make sense to me. There's a lot of things in the suttas that I can't make any sense of, right? I can't make any sense of, but I'm not going to push those aside and be like, well, since those things don't make sense to me, I don't need them. I'm just going to take the parts that make sense to me. The whole argument of Buddhism is based that we're living out of ignorance, right? If we don't recognize our ignorance, our lack of understanding, you're never going to be able to overcome it. So if you just keep following your own tendencies, that's a big. But secular Buddhism leads to other things like the commodification of Buddhism, the lack of recognition, the cultural appropriation, the lack of recognition to the people who brought us this, usually Asian Buddhists, this kind of conceit of like, oh, we're the real Buddhists and culture Buddhists are the lower Buddhists, right? So there's all these kinds of secular Buddhists doing stuff without acknowledging. Now, like there's the Buddha AI. Nobody asked Buddhists what they thought about this. Buddhists were not consulted about this kind of things. So there's all these kinds of problems that are kind of justified through like, well, this is the rational modern way of doing it. Therefore, we don't need to even take into consideration what people are doing over there. There's superstitious, magical Buddhism that they're doing in Asia. So these are just a few things that that I have found very problematic when it comes to secular Buddhism. But I could go on for a long time. There's the Mindful Hype, which was a great article. There's Big Mindfulness, which is another great book. There's so much stuff that's been written on this. I think the intention is good, and yes, obviously Buddhism always adapts to every culture, but we need to be very clear about about what are the effects and what's happening, and also who's being left out and who's paying the price for this kind of new way that Buddhism is being presented. And usually the price is very heavy. I think the meditation industry is over $1 billion now. Yeah, and most of it's taken up by mindfulness, and so it's become a very lucrative thing, which secular Buddhism is a big part of this money making industry. So those are just a few of my thoughts, but I have other talks on it. You just Google me and you'll find stuff.
Well, that's maybe a note to close on. So maybe we could say apologies to, we have a vote, says from Karuna, yes, vote for a separate live stream on the history of Dhamma transmission. We have Teddy the cat here, who is hopefully not going to disrupt the Dhamma.
Okay. I can't see him on the camera. He's creeping around in here, trying to get our attention.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
the monastic cat, Teddy.
So maybe, Ajahn, would you like to close the words?
Sure. Maybe we can mention what was coming up for the weekend. We turned on the air conditioning here today at Empty Cloud. There's this intense heat wave we're having here in New Jersey, and so it's cool in here at the monastery now. And I'd like to encourage everyone to come in, everyone who's free, to enjoy some more Dhamma here at Empty Cloud over the weekend. We're very privileged to have with us a very senior Sinhalese monk named Bhante Sumita, who is here for a short time. He'll be leaving before the Wasa starts, the end of July. And he'll be teaching a meditation session Saturday night, starting at 6 o'clock. So that's tomorrow night. The session runs from 6 to 7:30, usually a guided meditation and a Dhamma talk and some Q&A, some kind of a mix of those kinds of things. And so that's something to come and enjoy tomorrow evening. And on Sunday, it's a full day of Dhamma practice and activities, but one aspect of the centerpiece is the meditation workshop from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And Bhante Sanata Vihari will be leading that. And so there you go, two great offerings over the weekend, as every weekend here at Empty Cloud. And then we'll have more live streams starting again on Wednesday. So good luck to you all, and I hope you all prosper in the Dhamma. Keep up your practice, and best wishes to everyone.
Bye-bye, everybody.